What is up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. I am Dave Smith. He is Robbie the Fire Bernstein. How are you today, my good friend?
I am doing well. How are you, Mr. Smith?
Doing well. I am looking forward to our weekend in San Diego. Not so much the traveling part, but I am very much looking forward to the shows. So come on out if you're in the San Diego area. Come on out to the American Comedy Company this weekend. ComicDaveSmith.com for those ticket links. Actually, we got a lot of gigs coming up, like in the pretty near future, that I'm very much looking forward to. So go over to the website and check it out and come see us. And Rob, you got we're in the porch season.
Oh, I'll be playing porches countrywide, and the next runs are West Palm Beach, St. Augustine, Florida, Austin, Texas, some other places in Texas. Go to porchstore.com. There's like 40 porches, so I'll be playing a porch near you.
Ooh, very cool, very cool. All right, so all right, let's get into some stuff for today's episode. Now, typically on the show, it is a rule of thumb that we both try our best to live up to, that we act as if Canada does not exist.
Good policy.
It's something. It's just a common sense policy. It's a matter of survival. But in all seriousness, we don't talk too much about Canadian politics because
we don't care.
Yeah, obviously. There will be things sometimes that kind of break through. Obviously, the most notable stuff would be like when the trucker protests were going on during COVID. We did a lot talking about that. I mean, obviously, this is our neighbor to the north, and it was a very interesting dynamic. I mean, really, debatably, like the largest freedom protests in modern America. Sorry, there I go again, making it American, but in recent history. And of course, the government crackdown of that. Like, there have been things that are kind of interesting. And I do want to just preface by saying that, I don't know that much about like Canadian internal politics. And it is difficult, even though Canada is our neighbor, there is a distinct culture. There is a different politics up there than there is down here.
Nicer people, dumber politics. That's how I would sum it up.
Yeah, and there's some connection between those two, by the way, right? Like there's almost like a weakness that comes along with the kindness there. But anyway, if you guys aren't paying attention, evidently, or not evidently, the Liberals had a big victory yesterday. And this is, there's several things that are kind of interesting about this. Again, obviously, neither one of us are nearly as fluent in Canadian politics as American politics. And I know I have been accused before, and it's probably true to some degree, that I'm somewhat guilty of making everything about America. There's a reason for that, though. I mean, largely, I think it makes sense. I focus on the country that I live in. And honestly, even when I'm focusing on like Israel, Palestine, it's because the country that I live in is so implicated in this conflict. And it's number one, that just makes sense to me. America is what I really care about. I have 2 little children, and I do not plan on leaving this country. So, like, my children are going to grow up in this country, and what I care about much more than anything else is what kind of country they're growing up in. I remember Noam Chomsky had this old line. It was something like, which I always thought he was talking about how and this is all true, by the way, but that there was like during the Cold War, there was a ton of like Soviet propaganda about how racist America was. And we're talking like right in the aftermath of World War II. So like late 40s, early 50s. And they would talk about, segregation and how horrible Americans treat black people in the Deep South and things like this. Now, okay, all of that was true. You know what I mean? Like, they weren't making it up. It was a real thing. But you could also like look at that and be like, really, Joseph Stalin? Like, that's your deal? Is that you're focusing on how, as you're, like throwing people in gulags, you're talking about how awful it is? It's like, there's an interesting game that people can play where they always want to focus on the crimes of others rather than the crimes of their own society, and therefore somehow kind of like, skirt their own responsibility. You see this all the time. Almost everybody I've ever debated on foreign policy is guilty of this. It's all day they want to talk about Hamas or Hezbollah or Vladimir Putin or, these horrible crimes that other governments commit. And then you got to sit there and be like, yeah, but like, okay, but what has our government done? So I do think as a general starting point, it's good to focus most on your own society. But then on top of that, we just happen to live under the world empire. Like, our government happens to be the most powerful government that's ever existed. So it just makes sense. In this case, with these Canadian elections, I really don't think I'm being American-centric or I'm overplaying how much of an impact American politics had on this result. And I do think it's something that is important enough to think about. And when I say this, like, literally all of, including the biggest campaign ads and the victory speech, were all about Donald Trump. And so essentially, from my understanding, is basically this: the Liberals have dominated Canadian politics for quite a while now. And of course, Justin Trudeau was like the poster child of this. He was their Obama, down to the blackface. They were basically the same. And this was essentially everything that you could think of during the rise of what is now known as wokeism in America, a social justice warrior kind of Democrat type shit. Canada was always a couple clicks to the left of us on that. Like if we were the transgender kind of stuff that, really rose up over the last, 13 years or so, 15 years. Canada was like straight up, they were having, the Bill C-16 that Jordan Peterson rose to fame opposing, was like mandating speech, like mandating that you have to call trans people by one of their 72 different, genders or whatever. They had, there were incidents that I'm sure you remember, one comedian who got fined like $300,000 for making an offensive joke. They were always like, they were, several clicks woker than America ever got. And this just kind of persisted. And it was really, it seems like COVID kind of broke this. And that COVID really gave the conservatives in Canada like a lifeline because, the Liberals were in charge and they mismanaged everything. And it really looked to a lot of people, and I've heard from a lot of Canadians that like they really thought the Liberals were done and that they were going to come back, and the polling seemed to back that up. And then, of course, Trudeau resigned in disgrace, and it seemed almost like in a very similar parallel to America, in the same way that Obama kind of seemed like almost, this rock star political force that was like so popular. And now you see Obama today and everyone just kind of looks at him as like a scammer. Like he doesn't have that same like aura anymore. And it does seem, at least according to certainly the campaign ads and the victory speech last night, that what really happened here was that there was a reaction to the stuff Donald Trump's doing. And this is something that I've been reading a bit about this morning. And again, I'm really approaching, compared to other issues that I talk about, I'm just much more of a novice on Canadian domestic politics. Not that I'm an expert on other things, but I have a much deeper, understanding of some of these other topics. But basically, all these Canadian journalists that I'm reading today, they're all saying it's not even the tariffs. It was the 51st state thing. And that really struck a nerve with a lot of Canadians. And you know how these elections work. It's like if you move the middle a few clicks, that's the difference. And people in the middle seem to really respond poorly So the idea that even though he's kind of hiding behind the joke, but then keeps saying it and then says he's not joking, they really did not like this idea that they were getting bullied by this new American president and being talked down to in this way. And look, feel however you feel. I'm not necessarily saying that therefore Donald Trump shouldn't do something he's doing. I mean, it's, I kind of am saying that, but it's quite possible that this behavior from Donald Trump just took our neighbor to the north from actually moving in a much more positive direction and sent them back into the opposite direction that even Donald Trump would want to say. So I do just think, just to start off, I think there's something, and I'll let you jump in here, Rob, and give your thoughts, but there is something in politics. This is something I've noticed a lot over the years, where almost everybody has a real issue. They have trouble taking into account in their worldview that no matter what political goal you have, there will almost certainly be a counter reaction to that. And, it's some political equivalent of like Isaac Newton's laws of physics. Like every reaction has an equal and opposite reaction. Like there is just like, it's like, it never seemed to me that in the years of like woke insanity, that any of these like young social justice warriors ever thought to themselves, like, there's going to be a snapback to this. Like, if we push this much radical change this quickly, there will be a counter movement. There will be a resistance to this. And I think that's true for liberals and conservatives, left wingers and right wingers. But I just think it's because it's like, it's a higher order of thinking. It's much easier to just think about the policy you're trying to get into play right now. This is also something I've been thinking about because I'm getting ready to do an immigration debate at the Soho Forum coming up in a couple weeks. And it's one of my, one of the things I think about a lot with immigration for people who advocate for like open borders. You're like, well, what do you think the reaction to that would actually be? Like, have you thought that through? Have you considered that? But it does seem to me, and at least, again, this is what I'm reading from Canadian journalists and pollsters and stuff, that it does seem that like that's what we just saw in Canada, was that there was a counter reaction to Donald Trump's tariff policy and 51st state rhetoric. Any thoughts on this, Rob? Feel free to.
I think Canada can vote in whoever they want because they're going to end up under Donald Trump's rule anyway. So, what does it matter? 51st state. I think listen, I don't love Donald Trump's tariff policy, but if Donald Trump's lunacy pushes other countries to elect leaders to try and be more at odds with Trump, whatever. And Donald Trump does have a way of bullying people, and I'm not forecasting this to be a win, particularly in our trade with Canada. I think we get a lot of cheap energy from them, and that's where most of the Canada trade surplus comes from. And so I don't know that pushing for a change in arrangements with Canada is even a win for our country. But the way those idiots up there want to vote and bring back Trudeau or whatnot because they're annoyed with Trump, it's just it's not on my list of criticisms of Trump.
Yeah, well, look, I certainly understand that. As I prefaced at the beginning, Canada is not that important. But it does suck for the decent people under up there that they're going to have to live under this government again. Although that is the way it works. By the way, did you see? This is a kind of separate point from Canada. It's like Trump just has a different strategy for playing the game, and to say, hey, if Donald Trump had more diplomacy, look at what would be going on in other countries. It's like, so he might have lost to Canada. He might win another one. I don't know. Yeah.
It's
no, that's a fair point. On the tariff stuff, did you see this, Rob? That and I didn't even have this on my list of things to talk about today, but it just popped into my mind as we were talking about the tariff stuff. But did you see the back and forth between Bezos and the Trump administration on what Amazon's doing here? I got to say this. Just because, look, when it comes to like Jeff Bezos versus Donald Trump, my dog in the fight is like, I tend to want to side with Donald Trump generally speaking. I don't know. I don't like Jeff Bezos, and I really don't like him as a political figure. I think the Washington Post was tremendously degraded under his leadership. But like, essentially, what happened is like Amazon said that they're going to like basically show you in the price what part of it is from the tariffs. And then the White House is flipping out about how this is an attack on the Trump administration and all of this. And I'm just looking at it. I'm like, I just really don't see how the administration has a leg to stand on here. That just seems like a totally reasonable thing for Amazon to do. Like, if you're enacting a policy that is forcing their prices to rise, for them to just point out this percentage of it is because of the tariff policy. Like, they're putting a tax on the stuff that we're selling to you, so we have to raise our prices. I mean, I don't know, Rob, what's the counter to this? I'm just like, I that seems totally reasonable. It'd be like objecting to like somebody breaking down the tax on your bill of anything. We do that with lots of different bills, and I don't see any like if you were furious at a hotel for saying like, oh, the room is $250 plus $30 in tax, and you were like, just say $280. You're not allowed to say that or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like, this just seems silly.
So I actually have a bunch to say on this. I was talking to a buddy of mine this morning, and I do think that there's a great opportunity in the market right now for someone to create a Amazon-like website that only sells American-made products and gives consumers an opportunity to know that things are made in America. Now, when it comes to Amazon letting you know the price increases because of tariffs, first is I think the regime did quite well with Amazon, and that it disguised a lot of the inflation that would have existed in the market by being able to make use of cheaper foreign labor and importing goods that otherwise would have increased more substantially in price. And they might be cheaper goods, they might be goods that don't last as long and that aren't of the same quality. But I believe that foreign manufacturing has helped the regime disguise what would otherwise be a larger tariff problem. Right. In terms of them turning around to Amazon and saying that this is what, like, they didn't quite use the word treason, but they were using very
pretty strong language,
very aggressive language of them undermining the regime. I was reading this book for a while, and it didn't really quite grab my interest, but it was called Propaganda, and it was from like Freud's, I think, son or grandson.
Bernays. Edward Bernays, yeah.
And it didn't grab my interest, book. So I read it on plane rides over the course of too long for how short of a book it was. But there was one piece in there. This was prior to the Donald Trump tariffs, where where the author was talking about how to sell the American public on that tariffs are bad. And one of it was like a department store that had dual pricing of like the with tariff pricing. And I was almost surprised that a brand hadn't done that yet. And that this is a very good way to educate customers or the voting public for, hey, here's the cost of tariffs, and this is what this is now going to cost you. I'm surprised that somebody hasn't done that sooner. I think that Amazon is, people are trying to complain, oh, well, why didn't they do that during Biden's inflation? Well, two, that's not just Biden's inflation. A lot of that came from Donald Trump's policies during COVID of shutting down and sending money to consumers. That wasn't just pure Biden. And this, someone has to fact check me on. If you're in the business of cheap goods, I don't know that inflation is definitely bad for your business. Like, I don't know that Amazon is killed by inflation because they're the provider of the cheaper goods and services. They might actually pick up customers and make better use of the supply lines. That I don't know that. So in other words, them advertising something that actually affects their business model, which is tariffs, is not the same thing as them advertising price increases because of inflation. I don't see them being as that to me is not a consistent criticism. And I think, just to put a point on it, the Donald Trump administration criticizing them for pointing out, hey, this new policy from the government is increasing your cost of goods, seems like fair play to me.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting points there. And, and on that point about whether price inflation actually helps Amazon, I mean, I guess we'd need Gene Epstein or Bob Murphy maybe to like school us on one of these. But I will say, I know this is somewhat anecdotal, but I think it gets to the point. But like, I know in my town where I live, I know there are 3, what you would call mom and pop stores that have been here for, I believe, all of them were around at least 30 years that have closed in the last 2 years. Like, I knew there was like a shoe cobbler, and there was a toy store and a bookstore, and all of them closed in the last few years. And so I do think it's like, yeah, I think that's who really gets screwed by the price inflation, is like, we all kind of know, like, you know, there are these kind of like nice little neighborhood stores that just don't have the economies of scale of these giant, you know, companies, and they got to charge a few bucks more for every product. And typically people kind of know that, but they like supporting their local store and they think it adds to the charm of the town or whatever. But when you have areas of high price inflation, like when people's like, you know, if your mortgage is going up and your energy costs are going up and your car payments are going up and your, you know, groceries are going up, it just puts a lot more people who are like, yeah, if we got to get toys for the kids, I'm going to order them on Amazon because they're just going to be cheaper. You know, it's like you got to find ways to cut where you can, and you could directly see these small businesses just like could not, you know, figure out a way to make that work. And so at least in that example, it does seem to kind of back up what you're saying, that like, oh no, it's good for Amazon because they're the cheap alternative. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Monetary Metals, a phenomenal company I've been telling you guys about for a while. If you own gold, you've probably been happy to see prices hitting new all-time highs over this last year, but your gold can do more than just sit there waiting for the price to go up. It can also generate passive income for you now because of Monetary Metals. You can earn up to 5% interest on your gold and silver paid in more ounces of metal, and accredited investors can even achieve double-digit returns in their bond offerings. All interest payments are made in ounces of gold and silver stored in your account, free of charge. Whether your metal is gathering dust at home or costing you annual storage fees, it's time to stop paying to own gold and start getting paid to own it, and put it to work with Monetary Metals. Go check them out at monetary-metals.com to learn more about how you can start growing your wealth in ounces today. Once more, that's monetary-metals.com. All right, let's get back into the show. You know, your example or your point about like a department store doing it or something like that, is that you're right. I completely agree. It's almost surprising more haven't done it, but Amazon doing it is just so devastating because it is like the biggest goddamn virtual store that almost everybody uses now. And look, again, it's like, I don't know. I think the administration is in a weird spot where they're just basically going like, don't let people know about this bad economic policy. Don't let them know that this is the reason prices are going up. But I don't know. That to me seems pretty weak. It's just a really weak argument. I don't understand what, like, I'm just saying, like, if you were going to make this argument, wouldn't you also have to say that it's, again, they didn't use the word treason, but you know, they did use very strong language. And it was like, would you say the same thing about a hotel? Every hotel room I ever got, or I think just about all of them, they always show you what the tax costs. You know, are they also, you know, like in defiance of the state government or something like that, because they're letting you know that this part of the price is artificially imposed by the government? Are they not allowed to let you know that? Like, even if you defend the taxes on hotel rooms, that is still what's accounting for this raise in pricing. And so why should we not know this? Like, is your argument somehow that like this is a good policy? You know, he's bragging on one hand about the revenue that it's going to generate, but then like you're not allowed to point out where that generated revenue is coming from. Like, this is just too nutty to me. I don't know. So I just really, it's just one of those things where it's like, it just seems like a really bad fight for the administration to pick, especially when over the years, when Donald Trump was trashing Bezos, he was doing it from the position of having the, you know, the moral high ground. You know, trashing the Washington Post for running all these articles about the Russiagate nonsense. It was totally just humiliating. I mean, all of them. The Washington Post and the New York Times, you know, we probably give over the years, we've given like CNN and NBC more shit because they're so much more egregious in the way that they would cover it. But the Washington Post and the New York Times just totally, I mean, like, severely degraded their own reputation on the Russiagate stuff. just totally, you know, like they ran with the story too, and never. And then it was such an opportunity for either of those papers to blow the lid open on the whole thing, you know, and just be like, yo, this is all complete horseshit. It was all right there in front of us. There's no reason why me and you could do it and nobody at the Washington Post or the New York Times could, other than they didn't want to. But so when Donald Trump was trashing Jeff Bezos for running a fucking propaganda rag, he was doing it with the moral high ground. But now he's trashing him for letting the consumers know where the increase in prices come from. I don't know. I can't really get behind that. Just seems too ridiculous. I don't know. Okay. All right. Moving on to let's get into this, because this is an interesting topic. There were articles of impeachment were introduced against Donald Trump. Shocker. It really is. I don't know, Rob. I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, but I find this kind of well, there's a lot of things that are hilarious about this. And before we play this video, I just wanted to be clear. I'm not going for the cheapest joke here alone. We will probably cover that too, but there is a broader point to this. But I guess I would just preface, even before we get into this video, there is an unbelievable dynamic that's been at work between, like, you have the corporate media and the Democratic Party, basically one, apparatus, and versus Donald Trump. This has basically been going on since 2016. It is amazing the ability that the Democrats and the corporate media have to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. It's like as soon as Donald Trump does something where you're like, oh, he played it bad there, this is a weak move for him, they go, hold my beer. We will over dramatize this and make complete fools out of ourselves while doing it, to the point that he'll start looking better. Like, it's just always the dynamic, constantly. And so, we were saying, like, yeah, the way Donald Trump is going about these deportations sure does seem to be like the dumbest way to do it. It sure does seem to be the way that's going to get the most pushback and the least amount of illegals actually deported. Like, what the fuck is the strategy here? But then there's this, it's like, to introduce articles of impeachment over the case of a guy, it just seems to me to be like, look, dude, I don't know how to say this. If tone deaf was a clip, the clip we're about to play is the personification of tone deafness. It's just nothing. It's unbelievable. You can, like, literally what is it? I sent in a video. It was from Chief Nerd, great Twitter account to go follow. But he posted this and just said, "This is not a Saturday Night Live sketch." It is. Here's the video of Democratic Rep. Shiri Tanedar on why he's introduced articles of impeachment.
This is Congressman Shri Tanedar. Donald Trump has already done real damage to our democracy, but defying a unanimous 9-0 Supreme Court ruling, that has to be the final straw. It's time we impeach Donald J. Trump. The court said the wrongfully deported Kilmer Garcia must be allowed to return and receive due process. Trump ignored it. He ignored the Constitution. He ignored the very checks and balances that keep our democracy intact. This isn't an isolated incident. It's part of a dangerous, deliberate pattern. That's why today I introduced a resolution to impeach Donald J. Trump, outlining 7 articles of impeachment. Article 1. Obstruction of justice and abuse of executive power.
I'm sorry, we have to pause for a second.
Go ahead.
Who is this burn victim Spock who talks like he's an Indian Muppet? And don't you need to speak English well to serve in our government? What county does this guy represent? How is this possible?
Rob, how insane is it that like, you just can't make this up. Look, I'm sorry. Again, I'm not, like I
don't
said,
even know what he's saying. All I'm hearing is only cash.
you buy 2 Slurpee, you get 3 Slurpee free. But like, genuinely, like, there is there no Democratic strategist who went, hey, if we're gonna impeach Donald Trump over the issue of immigration, where he is objectively popular, like he's got the support of the people over, and this is the big immigration fight, and we're going to impeach him over the issue of immigration, I don't think this guy should be the front man. Like, come on, dude. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be insensitive, and I'm not trying to be like a dick, and I don't like, I do not, look, I do not like the, some of the kind of like excesses of bigotry in the right-wing reaction to some of this stuff. But at the same time, it's like, dude, come on. Like, it's not just, first of all, and this is just whatever. We're comedians. We're allowed to fucking make jokes about this shit. It's our only area of expertise. This is where we've been. We can make jokes about this. But it is an objectively just hilarious accent. Okay. But all right, whatever.
I
We're being
literally
children.
need a translator for the burka burka bika baka. I don't know what he said.
In any, like, it's just so crazy to me to have a thick accent and then be leading the charge about immigration and impeaching the president who was elected with a popular mandate to crack down on immigration. It's like, dude, do you not see the optics here? Like, it's like, how do you, I'm sorry, but like, I don't know. This is how I've always felt. But like, if I wanted to, like, say, go move to Japan, and I, let's just say the Japanese government or the Japanese culture allowed me to move there. Like, there was a legal pathway where I could go live there now. And I wanted to live there because I thought it was a better place to have a life for my family and my kids. And I'm going in there and I barely speak the language. I've learned it a little bit, but I still have a thick American accent. And then the Japanese people overwhelmingly were like, hey, look, you came here legally, and that's fine. There's a whole lot of people who came here illegally, and we do not allow that. Like, we get to choose who comes and doesn't come, and we want the people who came here illegally to get out. And someone was like, I think it's really wrong the way they're going about doing this. You should lead the charge against this. I'd be like, no, dude, I can't lead the charge against this. Like, maybe I'll support you in your effort if I don't agree with the policy, but like, obviously I can't be the one to do that because you guys just let me in here. Like, what, this is crazy. It's absolute madness. And it really does, it just gets to the fact that there's a much bigger picture here, especially when it comes to immigration more broadly. And the reason why, like, immigration has become one of, if not the biggest issue across the West, not just in the United States of America. This is all throughout the West. Immigration is one of, if not the biggest issue. And there's a reason for that. And like, when you kind of zoom out and you look at it, for many years in America, obviously, like, as people kind of know, like, the caricatured version of American history is this kind of like, we're a nation of immigrants. We're all descendants of immigrants. And there is some truth to that. Like, there were huge waves of immigration into America. But, like, the truth is that if you actually look at American history, it's much more like, it's much more like a chart that ebbs and flows. Like, there were big waves of immigration, and then there were periods of time with very low numbers of immigration. And essentially, before 1965, I believe it's 65. Double check me on this, but I believe in the Immigration Act in 1965 is what really altered, like, the way immigration is done. It used to be, before that period, that the government explicitly gave favor to European and Christian countries that were immigrating here. And this is part of the reason why we had giant waves of immigration from Ireland and Italy and places in Europe, and not from South America. That changed in the mid-60s. And now, again, you'd have to go check the numbers, but for a long time now, I mean, immigration is overwhelmingly, I mean, I think it's 80+% is like, from third world countries, and it's, brown people of different types. Now, again, I'm nothing against brown people, nothing against third world countries. I'm just saying, like, this is how the immigration policy changed. And the thing about it is, right, is that the American people never supported it, ever. In 1965, I know that Ted Kennedy, I believe, was one of the people leading the charge for the 65 Immigration Act. And the way he sold it was by explicitly saying that this will not change the racial composition of America. That was how he sold it in the mid-60s. Now, he was lying through his teeth. That's not actually what ended up happening. But I'm just making the point that there's never been a time where there was a vote on this, or where the American people were asked and said, like, hey, do you wish to radically and drastically change the racial and cultural composition of the United States of America? And if they ever had been, it would have been a very resounding no. And that's why Ted Kennedy had to sell this as it's not going to be that. Because, look, think about it like this, right? So in the year, we're talking about the 60s here, okay? So in 1960, the country, the racial dynamics of the country, where the country was 90% white, 9% black, 1% other. Something right around those numbers. I mean, I have that exactly right, but it's very, very close to that. And okay, you essentially had a biracial country, not a multiracial country, a biracial country. And what do we all know? Like, what is the biggest story of the 1960s? It's the civil rights movement. Right? I mean, like, it was already in that environment. There were major conflicts and problems that were a result of having a biracial country. Now, that's not to blame anybody. That's not to say, like, and by the way, the black people were the victims in this scenario. I'm not blaming them for the racial. I'm just saying it is something that comes along with having more than what, but with having a non homogeneous, what am I saying? With yes, there you go. You know what I'm saying? Like, there are issues that come along with that. And then if you're talking about, like, drastically changing there's issues that come along with that. And the people never supported this. No one ever said they wanted it. And in fact, we've seen just over the last 4 years how unpopular huge amounts of unfettered immigration is. And, just in terms of the optics, I'm not even talking about the case. I mean, we could get into that. You could give your thoughts on that. But just in terms of the optics of, like, having somebody who speaks like a foreigner lecture you about how the president who just won every swing state and the popular vote can't go through on his immigration policy. It's just like, dude, look, there's a lot of dynamics going on here. There's a lot happening. But on top of all of that, right? Like, you could look up the like census projections and stuff like that. And, like, America, I think, is supposed to be a majority minority country in the next, like, couple decades. And I think ultimately we're going to be a majority Hispanic country. No, that's a big change. You might be all for it. You might think that's great. And maybe there's an argument for why that's a good change. I don't know, to be honest, what that argument is, but, like, maybe you think that's a good thing. But it is a drastic change. And for all the people who scream so much about democracy, it says sometime between 2041 and 2046 is what Natalie just put in the chat. And that's, by the way, this is not that far off in the future. As you get older, you realize, like, that time creeps up pretty quickly. But, like, even if you think this is an overwhelmingly good thing, if you believe in democracy or whatever, as many people claim to, I'm just saying the people don't want it. If there was a referendum on this tomorrow, it would be an 80-20 issue easily. Like, it is not, there has been no point where the American people have said, this is what we want. And so while you're doing this, okay, and this is true, like, all across the West, I don't think there's any population in the West, any white population that's, like, has a sustainable reproduction rate. Like, it's all fall, you know what I mean? And like, okay, feel however you feel about that. Again, as the example that I used to use all the time was, like, if you go to Italy and you were to say, hey guys, I've got some fantastic projections. Okay. Italians, listen up. Look, in the next 30 years, this isn't going to be an Italian nation anymore. Italians will be the minority here. It's going to be a mostly French nation. Isn't that awesome? I think most Italians would go, no, we don't find that awesome. We don't wish to be France. We wish to be Italy. And that doesn't mean they're racists. That doesn't mean like they hate French people or anything like that. It just means that like it's a very normal human reaction to be against that. And what you're seeing here right now, and this is a huge factor in American politics, is that like at the same time as we're looking down and getting closer and closer to the projections of this drastic change, there was like from the entire establishment, there was this rise in like anti-white racialism, where like it in all of like Hollywood, in corporate America, in academia, everything was about demonizing straight white men. We had these kind of like hyper affirmative action DEI policies that are just openly saying, hey, we're going to, through the force of law, we want to see more women of color in positions of power. We want to see more Black people in positions of power, more Latinos in positions of power, more gay people, more trans people, like with the force of law behind it. Translated, in plain English, everyone except straight white men we want to give favor to, while your demographic, which is used to being the majority, is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Now, again, to the point that I made earlier, could you have predicted that there might be a counter reaction to that? That a movement that opposes that might rise up? And, I guess essentially what I would say is that all of this stuff, whether it's like the declining birth rate or unfettered immigration, these are all policies. Like this didn't just happen. These are because of specific policies that were enacted intentionally by politicians that all of this is happening. And there was never a vote on it. Never a vote. In fact, every time there's a referendum at all, it goes completely in the other way. It's a Donald Trump winning, like demonstrates this. Even people who didn't like Donald Trump very much just were like, oh, I'm going to vote for this guy because fuck, I don't like. And so like, I'm almost like, I'm like floored by the optics of this video about introducing articles of impeachment to Donald Trump. It's just like bananas to me. This is why I said it's like if tone deafness was a video clip, it would be this. It's just like, read the room, man. Like have some understanding of the optics of all of this, even if you're for the policy. I don't know, Rob, anything you want to jump in there?
It's the same shenanigans where, you can make the argument, for example, when Donald Trump starts telling Amazon that they're not allowed to give consumers information, that's somewhat authoritarian. But then when the Democrats come around and they go, listen, voting public, you can't have the person that you voted in.
Yeah.
And after all these trials and a month after the election, we're going to try and impeach him. That's also cartoonish. And the reaction you're going to get to the Democrats once again trying to not allow him to actually orchestrate his presidency and start bogging him down with this nonsense, it's worse. It's what I was talking about the other day. The Donald Trump administration throws bullshit at you, and then all of a sudden the Democrats and the leftist media throws even bigger bullshit at you, and you're not even sure who to be more annoyed with. Stepping in now with what Donald Trump's done, there's nothing that should be impeachable. There should be no conversation about impeachment. It's funny. I was going to send this to you as a topic yesterday because came up with Chuck Schumer that he wasn't going to rule it out, but I was like, all right, they're not really talking about it. It's not even worth discussing. This is the first I'm seeing of someone actually putting it forward. So I think conversation from the Democrats about impeachment right now is lunacy. And then the fact that this guy's a congressman who barely speaks English or doesn't articulate it well for me to be able to follow him, the optics of that seem, unless, I don't know, is this guy, did he cure cancer in his region? And so he's the immigration story of why we need more immigrants. Is there some storyline I don't know about how this guy is the savior of Illinois or some area where he cured the poor and that this is why he's the person to lead the charge? Or does this guy somehow have a job in our government and doesn't speak English?
Right. Yeah. And I'm leaning toward the latter, although please prove me wrong if there is some story like that. But yeah, you know, and of course, like, this isn't in a vacuum. I mean, Donald Trump got impeached twice in his first term over just like pure bullshit. Like pure bullshit. And there's things that Donald Trump did in his first term that you could argue were impeachable offenses. But the two things he got impeached for were not them. I mean, it is insane. Like, he got impeached for what they called a quid pro quo with Zelensky. And the only problem with calling it a quid pro quo was that he didn't get anything. He didn't get anything. You know, a quid pro quo means I give you something if you give me something. He never got anything. He basically called Zelensky and kind of like, you know, it was a little like mob type shit. Like, he was like, oh, you know, I want you to look into the Bidens and maybe you don't get this weapons package that I was going to send to you. And then Zelensky never looked into the Bidens and Donald Trump gave him the weapons. So like, there was just absolutely nothing there. By the way, isn't it fucking crazy that story gets buried when it's like, oh, the story is that there was a civil war on the country on Russia's border and Donald Trump poured weapons into it. Hey, how'd that end up working out? Oh yeah, Russia invaded. Not so good. But that's the story there. Not that he for a second asked for the very real fucking corruption to be investigated. Like, it's just whatever, it's nuts. And then the January 6th thing was just ridiculous. Just totally ridiculous. And so now you're gonna impeach the guy, or you're gonna, you know, I don't think this is actually gonna, you know, take off, but you're introducing articles of impeachment over this. You know, the guy just got back in. He was enjoying record high approval ratings. His numbers are coming down now. And you think rather than let him continue to hurt himself, this is your play? It's fucking nutty, dude. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Hexclad. If you guys are interested in cooking healthier or saving money, or you just want to stop eating microwavable burritos, check out Hexclad. They've got you covered. It's time to leave behind the delivery fees and that scratched up pan you've been clinging on to since college. You've probably already heard of how Hexclads has completely revolutionized pots and pans by combining the performance of stainless steel with the convenience and easy cleanup of non-stick. But Hexclad's innovation doesn't stop there. Their Japanese Damascus steel knives are as sharp as they are tough, perfect for leveling up your meal prep. Their sleek pepper mill lets you season like a pro with precision and style. Gordon Ramsay might be the toughest critic in the entire world, and he used Hexclad both at home and in his Michelin star restaurants. I will tell you guys, my wife loves this stuff. They sent us a few of their pots and pans. She uses them all the time and says they're really great. So definitely check them out. And for a limited time only, our listeners can get 10% off your order with our exclusive link. Just head to hexclad.com/problem. Once again, that's hexclad.com/problem. Support our show and check them out at hexclad.com/problem. Make sure to let them know that we sent you. Bon appetit. Enjoy Hexclad's revolutionary cookware. All right, let's get back into the show.
I was just going to say, in those calls, he was slick enough to say, can you investigate crimes? He didn't say, can you create a crime? Can you fabricate evidence?
Yeah, that's right.
Evidence. And then if you flash forward to the fact that the Biden administration actually ran 5 court cases against Donald Trump, which goes beyond just trying to investigate crimes. I mean, what they did to Donald Trump was a lot dirtier, and it was with our own, court system. So the lunacy of that particular claim against Donald Trump. And he did the same thing also in Atlanta, where he was like, can you look in and find me the votes? He wasn't saying flip
the
votes.
Georgia's.
He wasn't saying create votes. He was saying, can you go look this over? I think that there was voting fraud here.
Yes,
and I just need you to find this.
You could argue certainly that both of the phone calls were inappropriate, but there's nothing criminal in either of them, you know? And yeah, like you could argue like, hey, you're getting into a gray area when it was like it reminds me of the do you remember the scene in Wolf of Wall Street where the FBI guys come on his boat and he's talking to the FBI guy and he's like it's crazy. It's like my brokers start at $200,000 a year. And if you ever wanted to do it, like I can give that job to anybody I want to. Like if you wanted to get out of being in law enforcement and get into that, you could start making money right away. And he was like, did you just attempt to bribe a federal officer? And he's like, no. If you read the law, that actually is not. Then he's right. That's not actually bribing an officer. Like now you could argue like you're kind of brushing up against it a little bit, but it's very clearly not a crime. Like they don't get him for that in the movie because that's not a crime. You could say to somebody like, hey, Pete, this is what you make working for me and that's what you make working for the government. What do you think? But Donald Trump didn't even come that close, if we're being honest. And yeah, just in, again, with all the other stuff taken into account. By the way, the other thing, which I thought was fascinating about the little detail we've talked about over the years, that it didn't come out till years later. But when Donald Trump made that phone call to Zelensky, the FBI was investigating Hunter Biden and partially dealing with his business in Ukraine. So it's not like to say that it was like on its face corrupt to ask for an investigation into the shit our government was investigating too. So it's clearly they thought it warranted an investigation. And how amazing is it that there was not one leak by the FBI? All these leaks, all these, you just can't help it. Everything gets leaked, but not that one. That one they kept quiet the entire time.
I also don't think Donald Trump has done anything blatantly criminal in terms of not acting quick enough to bring people back that the Supreme Court asked him to try and bring back. I don't think there's any.
The Supreme Court. Yes, it's not like the Supreme Court said you're in violation of the law. He needs to be brought back right now, and it has to happen. It was much vaguer than that, right? Like I remember you.
We're kind of a step away from this conversation in that, I don't know that I'm going to speak with the most clarity on this, but Donald Trump seems to be escalating these court cases in a way that you might have courts mandating something from him, and then he defies courts, and then we have a new conversation about what happens if the president is openly defying courts. And we might get there, and that might become a conversation which is almost along the lines of what was taking place the last time of what happens if the president does break the law, and if there's presidential immunity, what happens? Not that Donald Trump's doing this, but what happens if he decides to predator drone a political opponent? And then the conversation was, well, there is a mechanism for that, which is impeachment. So all of this seems very preliminary because Donald Trump, I don't think, has actually defied a court order yet to have to start having the conversation about the criminality of the president and whether or not I guess there should be an impeachment charge. This is just nonsense that's coming like far too early.
Yeah, no, 100%. But I guess I just can't get over the the optics of having this guy lead the charge. And just to be, as we talked about a few months back,
like a character on an Indian version of Sesame Street. I can't believe that this is a real guy and he's got a job in government.
It's unbelievable. And right, that's unbelievable enough. But that he's doing this on the topic of immigration, like I just don't. Listen, to be clear, we talked a few months back when Vivek Ramaswamy had that viral tweet that really seemed to lose him a lot of favor amongst like his base. And he was out of Doge shortly after. We don't know for sure if those two things were related, but it certainly seems like they might have been. And I did think, while I thought that Vivek missed the mark a little bit on that tweet, I did think the backlash he received was unfair. And some of it was just like straight out like bigoted. And I don't like is
Sorry,
the background
Natalie question.
Yeah.
Going on. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't coming through the mic.
I'm not hearing it at all. But so like I did think it was unfair, the backlash he got. And like personally, like as I've always said, I'm not a racialist. I don't really like racialism. I'm just not pretending it's not a fact or doesn't exist, I think is stupid. But look, I don't want, if there's any movement that doesn't have room for Vivek Ramaswamy or Sagar and Jetty or someone like that, then fuck that. I don't want to be a part of that. And I think those guys are like those guys have been goddamn heroic on so many fucking issues. And so like, I think it'd be stupid to like, base things off of like race or, not even nationality, because they're both American, but you know what I mean? Like ancestry or whatever. But there's just something about having this thick of an accent and leading the charge against immigration restrictions. And I understand you could say technically, no, he's talking about violating the court, but like, yeah. But what's the whole policy actually over? It just seems to me like even, like when when you're younger, sometimes people live with like a bunch of roommates or something like that, right? Like you'd have a place that has like 6 people living together, like a big apartment with a bunch of people living in it. And it's almost like if one of the rooms opened up and then you were like, the rest of these guys have been living here for 3 years. And then you were like, hey, can I rent the room? And they go, okay, sure. We're going to need a security deposit or whatever. Come rent the room. And then you got in there and you moved your stuff in. And like the first day you were like, guys, we got to do something about these pictures on the wall. And I don't like the TV over there. I want it to be over here. When you just immediately kind of be like, hey, dude, like you just got here. We've all been here for a while. Actually, how about you adjust to the way we do things? And not start like lecturing everybody else about adjusting to the way you do things. To me, that is like basic decency and courtesy. Like I would just think it's crazy. It's the example of me, going to Japan and then lecturing everybody about how they have to be more inclusive for white English people or something. Like, what the fuck? This is crazy.
Can we see the rest of the clip and see if he makes more sense?
Yeah. Here, let's go back to the clip.
Process to unlawful deportations, Trump defied court orders. Article 2, taking away Congress's power of the purse. Trump dismantled agencies and froze funds without permission from Congress. Article 3, abuse of trade powers and international aggression. He imposed damaging tariffs and threatened military invasions of our allies. Article 4, violation of First Amendment rights. He has retaliated against journalists, attorneys, and critics for exercising their right to free speech. Article 5, creation of an unlawful office establishing the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, and giving Elon Musk unconstitutional power over our government
can we just pause again?
And personal data.
All right, he's making a little bit more sense than I was giving him credit for, but to me, all these things are political, and I don't think Donald Trump has exerted more executive authority than previous presidents, particularly in the fact that other presidents have actually engaged in war without mandate.
He's bombing the Houthis right now without congressional approval, but they'll never go after that because every president does it. It's so much more of a serious crime and a serious violation of the Constitution. And especially if you really wanted to play that card, dude, they acknowledge on the Signal chat that this operation is not time sensitive, that we don't have to do this right now. From the defense secretary's mouth, AKA translation, we could go get congressional approval for this, but we don't want to. As like, this is crazy, dude. Say he's sharing data with Elon Musk. This is an impeachable offense. This is just nutty, absolutely nutty. And it's just politically speaking, it's the dumbest thing that the Democrats could do. But, Rob, that is
center congressman's on the case.
Yeah. There you go. All right, listen, guys, we're gonna have to wrap up there. We will be back with a brand new episode tomorrow. I got Dave DeCamp returning to the show tomorrow. Very excited for that. We'll get into obviously it'll be a lot of foreign policy conversation, and I'm sure we'll bring up as I just suggested, what Donald Trump maybe should be impeached for. Sure as hell ain't this stuff. All right. Thank you guys for watching. Hope to see some of you guys out in San Diego this weekend. Have a good one. Peace. What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. I am Dave Smith. He is Robbie the Fire Bernstein. How are you, good sir?
I'm doing well. How are you, Mr. Smith?
I'm a little bit annoyed at the moment. Having some issues with Delta. So this is, by the way, it's particularly for boomers like me. And I'm not a boomer technically, but I really am when it comes to a lot of this shit, especially for somebody who's like, my whole job is in technology and, online and podcasting and stuff, but I don't know anything. But it's like, I figure out kind of what I need to know. Like I'm better than actual boomers. But I'm so used to flying United out of Newark, and now I'm flying Delta out of LaGuardia just because Newark's on fire or something. I don't know. But man, just the little things where I'm like, I know how to do this. I know how to do this on my thing. Why does it have to be different?
Here's the thing about Delta. Delta's a nice lady, but you got to marry her. You can't. She's no slut. If you'll commit to Delta and you'll get their credit card, they're really nice to you.
But I'm just not in a place where I'm ready to commit to Delta like that.
Yeah, but if you're showing up and you're just trying to buy the main whatever, the discount flight,
but that's such bullshit.
Yeah, they don't. Then you might as well be on Spirit Airlines.
But Delta knew what this was. They knew I'm having problems with United, and so I had to come over to Delta. They knew what this was. They said they were down, and now they're acting like I did something wrong.
They should look at it as an opportunity to win you over. You're a good flying account. You would think if they treat you nice, you might go, wow, this Delta's pretty good. But no, they're a classy lady. They're like,
maybe that's why no one will commit to you, Delta. Maybe that's why you're going to end up with a bunch of cats in an apartment, Delta, because you never tried to get any. All right, whatever. I get your point. Good analogy. Not very happy with Delta. Delta's not putting out for me, so things aren't working out so good on my end. Anyway.
The experience with Delta it's night and day. Like, because you'll show up, there will be no place that you can even check in at. Literally, there won't be a place. You can talk to a machine. If you try and check in, they'll just scoot you along. But once you have status with them, they have a different place that you walk into. There's no line. There's a separate security line. Like it's class warfare out there. And if you're if you're in the upper classes, they're all right.
It's particularly frustrating because I've worked my way up. I've worked my way up from the bottom for so many years just to be knocked back down. Listen, my guarantee is this. I will be out in Appleton, Wisconsin tomorrow night. I will find my way there. Don't worry. I have flights. I'm just trying to get a better seat. But I am very much looking forward to that. Robbie, of course, will be there as well. We'll be out at the Skyline Comedy Club this week in Appleton, Wisconsin. And then we got a bunch of really great dates coming up, like some of my favorite clubs in the world. I know we're going to, this weekend is Appleton, Wisconsin. Next is Salt Lake City, Wise Guys. We love that club. Great time out there. Then we'll be for the first time doing a full weekend at the Comedy Works in Denver, which is supposed to be one of the best clubs in the country. I'm very excited to work there. We'll be back at what is one of the best clubs in the country, Cleveland Hilarities, Comedy Connection in Providence, Tacoma Comedy Club, Spokane Comedy Club, Detroit House of Comedy, and Tampa Side Splitters. Literally all of those clubs are like some of my favorite clubs to work. So very much looking forward to all of that. ComicDaveSmith.com is the website for all of the ticket links for the shows me and Rob are doing together. And then, of course, Rob, it's summer porch time or porch tour season. Can't even call it summer anymore because you do the full spring. But
that's right.
Porch tour.
Go to porchstore.com. We got a run of a lot of porches coming up. I'm countrywide, so go check out what's there. Porchstore.com.
There you go. All right. So for today's show, some of it I think will touch a little bit on the themes from the last show, but there's a little bit more that I wanted to get into. I want to respond to a Ben Shapiro clip that's going super viral that I think I alluded to on the last show, but I think it's worth actually breaking down. So one of the things, tell me if you think this was a good tactic, Rob. But I thought it was certainly fair. And I mentioned on the last show that Mark Levin had called Steve Witkoff an anti-Semite for using the term neocons. And then, Donald Trump, as we mentioned in his speech in Saudi Arabia yesterday, blasted neocons. And so I challenged Mark Levin. I was like, hey, so let's keep that same energy. Trump's an anti-Semite now, right? And like for all the people out there, I was like, oh, all the people like pushing the woke right thing and all that. He goes, it's Trump now, right? So what aren't you guys getting? And none of them are willing to do it, which is kind of funny in a way, right? Because I thought this was an example that was kind of telling in a way. Because there's a major divide. Obviously, it's all about foreign policy. Or at least for the most part, it's about foreign policy. And there's different camps. It's not as if there's two neat camps that you could divide everybody into. There's several different groups involved here. But I do think it's interesting that like when we talk about having principles, I don't think there's an example where you could look at me or you, say, Rob, or at people in our camp, broadly speaking, the Scott Hortons of the world, or, you know, Tom Woods or whoever. And if you were to say, hey, okay, you have these principles, like if I were to say whatever, you know, blank is a war crime, and then you were to go, well, Donald Trump just did blank, I'd go, yeah, he just committed a war crime. Like if I have principles, then I'm going to apply them to their logical conclusion. Whereas you have this very clear, like just the day before this happened, you said that neoconservative is a pejorative for Jew. Well, Trump just said neoconservatives. So what, like, do you actually care about fighting anti-Semitism? You know, like, because the president of the United States now, or is it only when it's his envoy and you think you could like turn the rest of the administration against that guy, you'll go after him. But and essentially the point is that all of them wouldn't dare. They wouldn't dare apply the exact same thing to Donald Trump, as we've done many, many times. And I just think there's something about that that's kind of revealing. It's like, okay, so then you don't actually have these principles, or you're actually not very committed to these principles. Because it seems like, to me, that seems to be a good litmus test for like who actually has principles and who's a fucking grifter. Because if you're just going like, well, calling Donald Trump an anti-Semite, that would lose me all of my popular support. And you're like, okay, then you don't really care about it. I don't know. There's something interesting on that. And I think it's funny that none of them want to touch it. None of them want to go anywhere near it. But anyway, it's pretty great that Donald Trump did that nonetheless. But anyway, prove me wrong, Mark Levin. He is my next. Maybe he should be my next debate.
Oh, that would be a juicy debate. I would love that.
Yeah, I'd have to wear earplugs to that thing. I'm not sure I could take that guy yelling at me.
Warhawks still out there, you know? He'll pitch them all.
Well, as we're about to go through this Ben Shapiro clip, you know, I will say I don't think it's ever going to happen, but I would still love to debate Ben Shapiro. You know, if he's open challenge is still in effect, anytime, any moderator, I would love to go do a debate with Ben Shapiro. I think that would be a fun one. I also don't know I don't know who else is left, at least on this topic. Like, I don't know who else is left, but I guess I'm open to other names. You know, the other thing I do kind of more and more, I would love to have not a debate, but I would love to have a conversation. I mean, I would do a debate, but I think it would be better just to have a conversation with Jordan Peterson. He's the one I'd really like to sit down with. I actually think we could have a really productive conversation. And he's the one at the Daily Wire who I actually think is at least was much bigger than the Daily Wire and more important than that. And I'm a real admirer of a lot of his early work. So he's the one I'd love to have a conversation with. I'd still love to debate Ben Shapiro, but I'm not holding my breath on that one. I think we got as close as we're going to get to that. But anyway, regardless, I did think this was worth breaking down and exploring a little bit more, because it's, again, this is kind of, it's on the same topic that we were talking about on the last show, but it really does just go much like the point I was trying to make there with Donald Trump saying neoconservative is this still a pejorative for Jews? It goes toward exposing what people's real priorities are. And I think that's something that's very important in this whole, you know, debate about this current conflict to recognize. So let's jump in. Here is Ben Shapiro from the other day on his show, and me and Rob will give our thoughts.
Clearly, what Hamas is attempting to do is basically settle all outstanding business with the United States so as to then create separation between the United States and Israel in Iran negotiations. That is what is happening with the Houthis as well. It is not a coincidence that as the Houthis are basically forswearing attacks on American shipping, and the United States is saying that the United States is no longer going to worry about the Houthis, essentially. Now, Hamas is now trying to do the same by releasing the sole living American hostage in the Gaza Strip, trying to basically say that the United States now has no part in that conflict. Well, okay, fine. I mean, if the United States has no part in that conflict, then Israel should just go and do what they need to do. That seems to me a proper solution with regard to the Gaza Strip. Now, the ugliest part, and there is an ugly part to this, is that there are widespread rumors and now news reports that Idan Alexander is going to be flown to Qatar to meet with the Emir of Qatar. This is vile. That's vile.
Okay, let's just pause it for a second.
You saw an American.
Okay, look. The first thing that you kind of got to notice here, and this is what I mean about kind of revealing true motivations. The first thing beyond any point that you could make is that, look, here are the facts on the ground. Donald Trump, a couple weeks ago, announced that he's come to an understanding with the Houthis that they will not be attacking American ships anymore, and we will not be bombing Yemen anymore. And then after that, of course, as we talked about last episode, Steve Witkoff was able to negotiate without giving anything in return the release of the last U.S. citizen who was being held by Hamas. And already you can see Ben Shapiro's pissed off. This is a bad thing to him. I mean, I'm not like adding anything. Clearly, he's upset about this. I don't think it's that crazy. You could take any clip of our show and you could tell when I'm generally pleased or generally displeased by something going on in the news. This is Ben Shapiro being pissed off. Just think about that for a second. These are unequivocally positive outcomes. This is what everybody should be happy about. Oh, okay, they're not going to attack Americans. Americans aren't going to attack them. Okay, these guys were holding an American citizen. Now they are no longer holding an American citizen. This is a positive. And yet Ben Shapiro is pissed off. Now, why is he pissed off? Well, he's already telling you in his own words that it's because this is a way for the Houthis and Hamas to win favor with America and to maybe not, you know, put some distance between America's necessity to be involved in this conflict. And that, you know, I mean, he's saying that's the reason they're doing it. He hasn't presented any evidence. I don't know that it is, but that might allow negotiations with Iran to proceed positively. So if look, I think it's fairly reasonable to say that if you're in a state with, let's say there's the threat of war is on the table. Like you might go to war with this government and you're in negotiations with them to see if that war can be avoided. Who the hell is not rooting for the negotiations to be successful? Who would prefer that this ends in war? That's like a crazy starting place. And yet that is Ben Shapiro's perspective. I just find this to be kind of wild. Any thoughts on this, Rob?
I think they're just trying to sell it however they can because, you know, Israel does a good job of provoking a fight if we're going to be there to back them. That's they're looking for us to be involved in the Iran war. And so the fact that we've, you know, I guess the Iran war would be our war. It wouldn't be Israel's war. So if the big claim is Iran's got all these terrorists in the region and that's why they can't be negotiated with, and I guess we've dealt with that problem of having conversations with these terrorists and figured out how to not have their interests actually get in the way of the American interest. That's very upsetting to Ben Shapiro that we've created a platform by which you can actually have a conversation with Iran because their sponsoring of terrorism in the region is no longer a deal breaker for the U.S. having a direct conversation with Iran. It sounds like he much prefers the framework of Israel's our number one ally and they need to be trusted. And so they should be just handling all of this within the region with America's backing. He prefers that framework of Israel deal with it and America will back whatever it is that Israel would like. But America first is no. Why is Israel going to dictate the terms for America, particularly if you're putting our backing on the line? So it just sounds to me like he's he's complaining about the exact framework that we're saying is a good shift. And he's going, this is horrible and despicable that Donald Trump would step in and want to deal with these people directly.
Yep. All right, let's keep playing.
America can do so in Israel. There are plenty of places that Don Alexander and his family can express their gratitude to President Trump, as well they should. Going to Qatar to meet the Emir of Qatar. Qatar is a terror sponsor country. Qatar is the number one funder of Hamas. It is disgusting to have a hostage who was taken by a group funded by Qatar go to Qatar to thank the Emir of Qatar for his freedom. It's an absurdity on its face if it were to happen.
Can we just pause for a second?
All right, well, yeah.
Wrong.
Yep.
Should not be.
I'd love to know if Qatar is the number one sponsor of terrorism in Hamas. Why aren't we bombing? Why isn't Israel bombing them? Why aren't they exerting influence there? I mean, if you're telling me that that's the number one thing and they're the ones who are able to negotiate these deals, why aren't you going after the Hamas leadership that's got all the money?
Yeah. Well, by the way, if you're disgusted at Qatar for funding Hamas, wouldn't you also have to be disgusted at Benjamin Netanyahu for insisting that they continue that support for years? It's unbelievable to me how anybody defending the Israeli government can get away with this shit. I mean, listen, again, this is widely reported. It is not something that like we're just making up, or it's not something that like we're even saying, hey, our guys have like a good source on this. This was reported in the Jerusalem Post, in the Times of Israel, in Haaretz, in the New York Times, in the Washington Post. According to the defense minister of Israel, the quote he used was that Israel, quote, begged Qatar to continue the funding to Hamas. In fact, just a couple of weeks before October 7th, Benjamin Netanyahu sent the head of Mossad to Qatar to ensure that the funding continues. And also, yes, Qatar is an ally of the United States of America. They may not technically be called an ally of Israel, but they certainly have a close working relationship with them. So the idea that we're supposed to now be so appalled that this guy whose life Donald Trump just saved, that he's going to Qatar to meet with Donald Trump. It's just like as if this is the real moral outrage, rather than like there's lots of moral outrages you could find here, Rob, right? But like, why isn't it? Look, if all Witkoff had to do was say, listen, return the last U.S. hostage, and this will really gain favor for you, I would think the moral outrage would be like, how has this not been done sooner? I mean, even within the Trump administration, forget me trying to put this on the last administration, say, why did it take 100 days? I mean, geez, weren't you guys like, you negotiated a ceasefire. In phase 1, 20 of the hostages were released. How come the American wasn't prioritized on this list? Like, why didn't we make sure we could get him? It seems pretty clear in hindsight that you could have gotten him. They were willing to give him up. Now, I'm not even making that argument because, as I said on the last show, I think it's, listen, it's terrible. All hostages being held are terrible. All deaths are terrible, even deaths of soldiers. But he was active duty and he was taken in an IDF uniform. That's just a little bit different. You're not like, it's not the same thing as just you're an American citizen on vacation. Like you were in a war zone on one side of that war. However, that's where you could look if you wanted to find an outrage. But the outrage is what? Now that he's free, he's going to Qatar. Why isn't it an outrage when the Mossad goes to Qatar? When Israeli leaders go to Qatar? What are we talking about here? Also, it's just, in the general context of all of the babies who are dying, you'd think that would be a little bit more of a moral outrage, but I suppose it's not.
Also, if someone from, is it Qatar or Qatar? I don't even know.
Qatar is closer to being correct. Unless you want to say it unless you want to do what Ben Shapiro does, or what like everyone does on cable news when a Latino name comes up and you have to say it in the Latino accent. Unless you're going to do that thing, Qatar, I think, is closer than Qatar, but either's fine.
And what would be the Arabic accent for Qatar?
I think when Ben Shapiro says it, oh, there you go. You could just call it that.
I would think if someone from Qatar was able to navigate this deal with Hamas, and they just got you released, don't you almost have a moral duty to sit down and make a plea for the other ones? And I would just think if you're interested in getting everyone else out and someone seems to have that kind of pull on Hamas, I mean, the bombing innocent civilians in Gaza doesn't seem to be the working strategy for getting people released. I would personally like to have as much information on who the Qatar team is that exerts influence over Gaza. And even if you want to go the other way of, well, we're going to seize their assets, we're going to go to war with Qatar, we're going to cut, like, even that. But I would just want as much information over who's actually pulling the strings and has the influence over there. And if this guy just got released and he can meet with the guy who made it happen and maybe make a plea for other people, that seems like a missed opportunity to go, fuck the guy that got me released.
Yeah, but again, though, this is kind of my point. It's a very good point, but this is kind of like what I'm getting at with all of this. It's like, look, you can tell by someone's, like, I don't know exactly how to say this, but you could, if somebody is sitting there and going like, this is just amazing. I'm overjoyed that this guy's life has been saved. What an amazing thing the Trump administration did. I'd kind of prefer they weren't meeting in Qatar. I wish they were meeting in Tel Aviv, but whatever, it's pretty great. Is it like, if that were the tone, there would really be nothing to talk about. But when you're furious about the whole thing and you're just morally outraged, and then your real issue here is clearly that, like, look, it's just so obvious here. What's the real issue? Well, now, Rob, negotiations with Iran might proceed. Negotiations with Hamas might proceed. And then there's really no need for America to back up Israel's war anymore. That's really the problem here. And so you're really kind of pissed off because it's like all of this was just an excuse for you to keep leveling Gaza and to ultimately take it and annex the whole thing and ethnically cleanse the Gazans out of there. That seems to be what you're upset about. And that's pretty damn sickening. Here, let's keep playing.
Facilitated by the United States. Qatar is the sponsor state of Hamas. In fact, if the Trump administration seriously wanted all hostages out of Gaza, they could do so tomorrow simply by telling the Emir of Qatar that the airbase in Qatar is going away and that it'll move to the UAE, which the United States could do. That should have been the approach of the Biden administration on October 8th. They should have said all the hostages come out or the airbase goes away. That's how closely tied together Qatar and Hamas are. Leydan Alexander is now 21. Hamas captured him when he was 19 on October 7th, 2023, of course. Now, all of this has some wider ramifications with regard to negotiations in the Middle East. Again, Steve Witkoff continues to say ridiculous things publicly. So Steve Witkoff, who again, I do not think is a good negotiator. I do not think that Steve Witkoff has demonstrated his bona fides along any lines. So far, all of the hostage deals have essentially been kind of mediocre in the sense that maximum pressure has not been exerted on the bad guys. Yesterday, Witkoff said we want to bring the hostages on, but Israel is not.
Doesn't this just say everything about who's who and like what side everyone's on? Sitting here, right? I'm supposed to be I think as I've been called by a lot of these Ziobots on Twitter, that I'm taking some type of Qatari money or something like that. Like we're also and we're just sitting here. We're like, yeah, no, screw Qatar, screw Israel, screw Hamas, like whatever. But hey, it's pretty wonderful that Witkoff's gotten 21 of these hostages out. For all the debates I've done on this subject and how much people try to like morally lecture you about what about the hostages, I'm the one celebrating when they get released. And Ben Shapiro's furious about it. He's attacking Witkoff, who's saying all types of crazy things, Rob. What are the crazy things? Oh, Ben Shapiro didn't let you know. By the way, that's always a pretty good tell. And someone goes, oh, this guy's saying all types of crazy shit, but I'm not going to tell you what any of the crazy shit he's saying. Because you know what the crazy shit is? He goes, man, there's all these war hawks in our government who just want the war to keep going. Man, Israel just seems committed to continuing this war. That's the crazy shit that Witkoff has said. That's what Ben Shapiro is talking about. That he's called out the neocons and the Israeli government for seeming to just want war. That's the crazy shit. And he doesn't really know what his bona fides are, right? Like, what makes this guy such a good negotiator? He goes, oh, well, I guess the 21 hostages whose lives he saved. That seems like pretty good outcome to me. This thing was going on for how long before Donald Trump took office? A full year, a year and 3 months, a year and 4 months before Donald Trump came in. None of this progress was made before Witkoff got on the scene. And there's 21 hostages whose lives have been saved since then. Plus, don't get me wrong, Israel broke the ceasefire and then started slaughtering people in Gaza again, but there was at least a little bit of a period there where they had a ceasefire going. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Blackout Coffee. I love Blackout Coffee. It's roasted right here in the United States of America by people who believe in liberty, believe in the Constitution, and so many of the values that this show is all about promoting. Plus, it's just really, really good coffee, and I love good coffee. I've been drinking their cold brew all day. Absolutely delicious. I highly recommend it. They've got over 25,000 five-star reviews for a reason. So go pick up some Blackout Coffee for yourself. You're going to really enjoy it if you're a coffee lover like me. And if you want to grab some, you can go to blackoutcoffee.com/problem right now and make sure to use the promo code problem to get 20% off your first order. That's blackoutcoffee.com/problem. Promo code problem for 20% off your first order. Support your values, support freedom, and drink some great coffee at the same time. blackoutcoffee.com/problem. Promo code problem for 20% off your first order. All right, let's get back into the show.
It's also interesting to hear that if the U.S. were to exert influence over Qatar, the hostages could have been released by the next day. And yet, I don't think I've ever heard that request from Netanyahu. I've heard a lot of requests for more bombs, but I wasn't even aware that, I guess the war hawks were aware of a secondary strategy of exerting influence over Qatar. It's something that I was saying, I think, at the outset of this, of go after the actual leadership. But apparently, there is a way to financially, according to Ben Shapiro, financially exert pressure over Hamas leadership in Qatar. And as to why Israel and America, or Israel hasn't applied pressure on America to go that route, I mean, I guess speaks to the needless killing of civilians in Gaza.
Or why hasn't Israel gone that route? I mean, you had a close enough relationship with them that you could persuade them to continue pouring in briefcases full of cash to Hamas.
Why do we hear constantly yelling about Qatar, the same as Iran, of Iran's the state sponsor of terrorism in the region? I don't seem to hear a lot of
now we're starting to
condemning Qatar.
Yeah, it's all fair questions. All right, let's keep playing.
Not willing to end the war. Israel is prolonging it despite the fact that we don't see where else we can go and that an agreement must be reached. There's currently an opportunity window we hope Israel and all the mediators will take advantage of. We're putting pressure on all the mediators and doing everything we can to bring the hostages home. It is not Israel's unwillingness to end the war that is leading to hostages being taken. That's like blaming the police for the kidnappers not releasing the hostages. No, actually, that's up to the kidnappers.
Hold on, let's pause it right there. Okay. So now Ben Shapiro embraces my analogy of the police coming to try to get some hostages out. Again, the problem Ben Shapiro is going to have is he goes, look, this is as ridiculous as blaming the police for hostages not being released. And it's like, well, yes, if instead of negotiating, the police came in and just started blowing up buildings because hostages were taken and killing a whole bunch of innocent people, I do think, in fact, we would blame the police. That makes perfect sense. And no, it is not the case that because there's a crime and then because the police get called, that now it would be crazy to blame the police for any of their behavior. Like, the police don't just get a get out of jail free card because they were called. Like, their actions are going to be evaluated as well. And again, the negotiations have been very tangibly successful. Now, they haven't been successful in terms of ending the war, but they have been successful in terms of retrieving hostages. So this whole thing is just so utterly ridiculous. Yeah, the police are also actors and they also have responsibility. And if police got called to a scene because there was like a domestic violence report or something, and then they killed a bunch of innocent people when they got there, yes, we would blame the police. And it doesn't follow that all of this is on whoever the criminal was who initially resulted in the police call. Even within this analogy, what Ben Shapiro is saying makes no sense. All right, let's keep playing.
Ended the war October 6th. It never had to happen in the first place. Meanwhile, all of this is part and parcel of broader negotiations happening over the Iranian nuclear program. According to the Wall Street Journal, the United States said it was encouraged by talks with Iran on Sunday after a meeting, but the two sides remain divided on key questions, including whether Tehran will be allowed to enrich its own uranium. Well, I mean, that is the key question. That is not one key question. That is the key question. The United States should have no interest in a deal with Iran where Iran continues to develop nuclear missiles. That is ridiculous. Anything that allows them the capacity to continue to develop nuclear materials, which can then be tied to their ballistic missile program, is insane. The United States should not be party to that. That is the JCPOA. That is the thing that Donald Trump labeled the worst deal in history. The United States should not be conceding points to the Iranian government. Again, Witkoff and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi met for 3 hours in the Omani capital of Muscat in their fourth round of negotiations since April 12th. After the meeting, the U.S. cast the latest talks, mediated by Omani officials, as positive and said the diplomacy would continue in the near future. Iran's foreign ministry spokesman said talks were difficult but useful in better understanding the U.S. position. Now, again, Iran has another goal in these talks. If they can't get a bad deal from the Trump administration, and again, I have faith that President Trump is not going to cut JCPOA Part 2. It would be a rejection of his own legacy. If Iran has another goal, it is delay. And a delay for Iran is as good as a deal. In October, the JCPOA period ends. At that point, they can simply rush to a bomb. Now, they could just rush to a bomb right now as well. They could simply violate whatever is left of the JCPOA, and they could rush to a bomb. Herein lies the problem. Right now, there's a window of opportunity for anyone who wishes to end the Iranian nuclear program. That window of opportunity exists because Israel eviscerated a few months back Iran's entire air defense program. So the skies over Iran are totally clear right now. Not only that, but Iran still has not developed retaliatory capacity that would deter action by, say, Israel. If Iran is capable of standing the Israelis down by negotiating with the United States for prolonged periods of time, that is their win. Simply the negotiations being dragged out over a lengthy period of time is something the Iranians are going for pretty clearly. The two sides are still very far apart on the question of whether Iran gets to retain its nuclear enrichment program. Witkoff has sent mixed messages himself because, again, he has no expertise in any of these issues. He set out what he called clear U.S. red lines, that Iran can't have an enrichment program under a deal, nor should it have any centrifuges, which enrich uranium. And then Iran came back and said they would never accept any such terms. President Masoud Pezeshkian, who, again, is a stand-in for the mullahs, said Iran has never sought and will never seek nuclear weapons, but it will not back down from its peaceful nuclear rights. After Sunday's talk, Araghchi said Iran was open to adjusting the amount of enrichment it does and the purity of the material being produced for a limited period as a confidence-building measure. But he said there is no room for discussion about Iran's continued domestic enrichment. So what exactly is Iran giving away that makes Steve Witkoff and company optimistic in any way? Again, this is just so Iran can delay. And if President Trump doesn't want to bomb Iran, which again he has set out as sort of binary, there's a third option here, by the way, which is that the United States maintains maximum pressure on Iran, and then Israel goes and attacks the Iranian nuclear facilities. I think that is actually the most likely outcome here if I'm just gaming out the possibilities for the next several months.
All right, let's pause.
With all of that said,
is it not crazy how much these guys love war? That is just like negotiating. Is that all sides of the negotiation are saying, hey, they're going pretty good. And this is a real problem. Because how do we get to war at the end of this? That, like, and again, all of this stuff about there's so many just assumptions built into this line of argument. Like, you're just supposed to accept that Iran developing a nuclear weapon would be the worst thing in the world, that can't possibly be allowed to happen. Why is that? Like, look, I'm not saying I don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon personally. I'd like to see less of them. Nuclear weapons are dangerous, but like India and Pakistan both have nuclear weapons. They're in the middle of a conflict right now. The only country that I'm aware of that has nuclear weapons that lies and pretends they doesn't is Israel. They're the only ones who somehow are able to get away with just claiming they don't so that they don't have to meet any of the legal requirements. No other country that I'm aware of is able to do that. But I think, it's funny because obviously, as many people may know, right, like officially, Benjamin Netanyahu testified in 2002 that the U.S. should overthrow the mullahs in Iran. Israel has been for a regime change there this entire time. They're always attempting to create this sense of urgency, like this war has to happen right now. And they've gone through a bunch of different bullshit lies over the years of how, famously, I'm sure most people remember, we've talked about it a lot, when Benjamin Netanyahu went to the UN with his Daffy Duck bomb and said, they're all the way here. They're 5 years away. They've been 5 years away since I was a kid from getting a nuclear weapon. Benjamin Netanyahu himself has said Israel is 5 years away from a nuke in the 90s. In 2002, he said it again in 2011. He said it again, just 5 years away. Then when Obama signed the Iran deal, which they were just referring to, he said, Benjamin Netanyahu said, now that put them on the fast track toward a nuclear bomb. So I guess from 5 years down to, I don't know what, 3 years, they're on a fast track now. All this time later, everybody acknowledges they still don't have a nuclear weapon. But we're supposed to pretend that their civilian nuclear program is this huge threat because, as Ben Shapiro says, which I think he's actually correct about this, they could go for a nuclear weapon at any time. They could do it now. They could do it later. I think the real issue here is that everyone would know if they actually were going for a nuclear weapon. But regardless of that, why is it such a given that this must be a priority for the United States of America? I mean, the idea that what they used to say, okay, and they used to say this about North Korea, and they used to say it about Iran too. This was like the propaganda right after 9/11, was that, listen, a lot of countries have nuclear weapons. We've lived in a nuclear world now since World War II. Of course, the only country who's ever used nukes against people was the United States of America at the end of World War II. But what happened after that is the Russians developed them, and then we lived in this world of mutually assured destruction. And so no one's using nukes now because we know if you use them, the other side's going to use them. We're all going to end up dead. So we can't do that. However, there are these regimes like North Korea and Iran, and they are so suicidal that they don't care about mutually assured destruction. If they get nukes, they'll just start nuking people because they're like religious fanatics and they don't care about whether they get killed too. So we can't allow them to have nukes. After that, North Korea developed nukes and has still never used them. Iran, I guess somewhere implicit in this argument is that they are still so goddamn crazy that they would use nukes if they had them. The problem is that if Iran was interested in committing suicide in order to kill some people, they certainly could do that right now. And yet they're not. And yet at every turn, the way that Iran has behaved has totally undermined this claim that they, unlike everybody else, they're so uniquely evil and crazy that they don't care about their own survival. Like, if that were the case, why did they give the U.S. a heads up before they flew those missiles at Israel last year? Like they've got, why are they negotiating right now? None of this makes any sense. If the view is that Iran are so, like, they're just so insane and they're such religious zealots, they don't care about their own survival, they just want to do damage, why are they even negotiating about this? Why aren't they, as Ben Shapiro points out, racing to get a nuclear weapon right now and then using it aggressively? What is constraining them from doing all of that if the underlying assumption is true? And there doesn't seem to be any real argument there. And, like, again, look, and I think this is part of the thing that gets so infuriating about these, like, Israel firsters, is that it's like, look, number one, it's very clear that Ben Shapiro is motivated by what's best for Israel, or what he thinks is best for Israel, and not by what's best for the United States of America. Ben Shapiro, by the way, Rob, I should read, there's an old Ben Shapiro tweet that's been recirculating from 2011. This is Ben Shapiro tweeted, I would gladly waive the born in USA requirement for president for Bibi. Okay, it's on record saying Netanyahu should be the president of the United States of America. Like, this is who this guy is. It's who he's always been. Some people here may object to that that idea, but you're sitting here and you're going, look, okay, well, you know what might have to happen if America's not willing to join in this war? Then maybe Israel's just going to have to go at it themselves. They're going to have to, okay. as you guys all well know, when Israel, what happened was Israel, I think it was a drone bomb attack, or they killed an Iranian in Syria at an Iranian consul. And then as a response to that, Iran sent some missiles at Israel, gave the U.S. forewarning of this, and then a team of nations, the United States of America, the UK, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, well, I think Egypt was involved. I can't remember if Egypt was involved. Definitely Jordan and Saudi Arabia. They all came together to protect Israel and shoot down as many of these rockets as they could. All I'm saying is, like, if you want to have it this, like, we're going to attack this country and we don't even need you, it's like, okay, fine. But then don't be asking for our defense, as you surely will be when the missiles come firing back at you. Because, sorry, not that any of this is perfect, but this is the way the world works. You fire missiles at a country, they may fire some missiles back at you. And so if you're not in a position to defend yourself, don't go out. You can't turn around and start talking tough. Like, well, if you won't do it, then I'm just going to do it. It's just, it's infuriating. Anyway.
It seems like a very convenient storyline of now's the only opportunity for us to strike their nuclear facilities. If we strike their nuclear facilities at this point in time, there will be nothing that they can do back to us. And if we don't do it right now, then they will have a nuclear bomb in the future. And if that intelligence is true, then go do it. And you know why? I'm going to guess that that's not true. I'm going to guess every piece of that information is not true, that you get a free ride to attack it, that they can't attack back, and that you can actually permanently ruin their ability to get the bomb. None of that sounds true. If all of that is actually true of, hey, this is our one window of opportunity and it's easy for us to do, then just go do it. I'm just going to guess that none of that is true.
Yeah. Well said.
And by the way, if that is true, why aren't you guys selling that storyline? I mean, if all of the intelligence that he just put forward is the current situation of, hey, we've got a free shot right now and they will never be able to have a nuclear bomb, and this is our one moment and it will be totally free. There will be no retribution if we do so. Why isn't that every day on the news? I mean, if one piece of this is true, why Netanyahu wants, why was there chatter of war? It sounds to me like we don't need a war. You need a single strategic strike, and that would be the end of it. So why isn't he in America just lobbying for Israel to do a single strategic strike? That sounds very sellable.
Yeah, no, it's a fair point. Yeah, because that's not actually what they want. All right, here, let's keep playing.
All of this ties into broader Middle Eastern negotiations that are happening over everything from the Abraham Accords to the release of hostages to the future of the Gaza Strip to what's happening in Iran. Now, all of this crosses paths, obviously, with President Trump's visit to the Middle East this week. The biggest story in terms of the media coming out this week is a story reported by ABC News, among others, that the Trump administration is now preparing to accept a super luxury Boeing 747-8 jumbo jet from the royal family of Qatar. It is a $400 million gift available for use by President Trump as new Air Force One until shortly before he leaves office, at which time, according to the deal, the plane doesn't stay with the United States government. It then moves to the Trump Presidential Library Foundation. According to ABC News, the gift had been expected to be announced when President Trump was on his visit to Qatar. A senior White House official said it's not going to happen in Qatar anymore, presumably thanks to social media blowback. President Trump put out a statement on Truth Social about the blowback saying, so the fact that the Defense Department is getting a gift free of charge of a 747 aircraft to replace the 40-year-old Air Force One temporarily in a very public and transparent transaction so bothers the crooked Democrats, they insist we pay top dollar for the plane. Anybody can do that. The Dems are world-class losers. MAGA. So, again, the arrangement itself is, shall we say, I believe the legal term is skeezy. Sources told ABC News that lawyers for the White House counsel's office and the Department of Justice drafted an analysis for the Defense Department, concluding it's legal for the DOD to accept the aircraft as a gift and then later turn it over to the Trump Library, and that somehow does not violate laws against bribery or the Constitution's prohibition on emoluments. The Constitution literally says the U.S. government cannot accept official gifts from any king, prince, or foreign state. Apparently, Attorney General Pam Bondi and the top White House lawyer, David Warrington, concluded it would be legally permissible for the donation of the aircraft to be conditioned on transferring its ownership to Trump's presidential library before the end of his term. And apparently Pam Bondi, who it should be mentioned at this point was once an actual FARA registered agent acting on behalf of the government of Qatar, provided a legal memorandum addressed to the White House counsel's office last week after Warrington asked her for advice on the legality of the Pentagon accepting such a donation. We'll get to more.
All right. So, after all this ridiculous kind of cheerleading for war, of course, Ben Shapiro is very outraged about this, the offered gift that the Qataris have offered to buy Donald Trump a plane. Look, we could get into this a little bit here. I will say it's pretty rich. It's pretty rich for any of these Israel firsters to have suddenly decided that outside influence on the US government is a very big problem. And of course, only in one direction. And, AIPAC can say that the A stands for America as much as they want, but AIPAC gives tens of millions of dollars to political candidates. They, I think, were the biggest contributor in the last election. They are enormously powerful and influential. There's also, obviously, there are entire organizations like the ADL and the Southern Poverty Law Center that are kind of set up to ruin the life of anybody who's a critic of Israel. So look, I'm kind of with Ben Shapiro in a sense. I don't like stuff like this. I don't think the Trump administration should do this. I think it's it's particularly the aspect of it being transferred to Trump's library does seem to me to be not okay. However, more broadly speaking, it's the idea as the founders themselves wrote, George Washington spoke about this in his farewell address. It's be friends with the world, talk with people, negotiate, trade with people. Just don't have war guarantees. Don't get in the middle of these entangling alliances. That to me is a much better step than, the idea of a foreign government wanting to give us a gift. While I don't like it if it could at all be considered a bribe, which I do think this could be, and I don't think Donald Trump should accept it. That being said, it's you can see where Ben Shapiro is so angered by friendly relations to the broader Muslim world, by negotiating with the broader Muslim world. That really angers him. The idea of another catastrophic war seems to excite him, or seems to be what this all should end, what the end result of all of this should be. And that to me is fucking nuts. That's really what's nuts. But I don't know, Rob, if you have any thoughts on this Qatari plane.
Yeah, my thoughts on the Qatari plan is I don't prefer it. I think our country spends enough money. If you want to show the grandeur of our country, it makes more sense that we're able to afford our own plane. It also sounds to me like a bit of a security risk in that if I was the president, I don't think I would want a plane that came from a foreign country. So I don't prefer it. And there certainly are the optics of, hey, is there some sort of a favor dealing going on here with it going to the library? I'm getting a little bit bored of myself criticizing everything Trump does. And so amongst all the things that aggravate me, this one's just not I don't prefer it. I don't think it's better. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's good. I don't instantly go, hey, this is the worst example of a government official being bribed and that this is the most horrible thing going on in the country. So I don't prefer it. I don't think it needs that much chatter about, hey, that this is horrible. And I'll be curious to see if he goes through with it. And it just sounds like a security risk. I don't really understand.
Yeah, I had that thought too. Yeah. Yeah, well, it certainly does. You're you're sure you've really checked this thing pretty good, right? They didn't hide anything or rig this thing in any way. Yeah, I tend to agree with you about that. Yeah, I don't prefer this. It seems like bad optics to me. I also don't if the argument is that this is some type of bribe or something like that, it's or some type of quid pro quo, it's but what what exactly do you think they're actually going to get out of Donald Trump that they wouldn't otherwise get because they bought him a nice plane? Like, is the idea that, like, okay, even after Donald Trump, I don't exactly understand. Like, so they're not giving it to Donald Trump, they're giving it to his presidential library. But is the idea that Donald Trump could keep flying on this plane, like, after he's out? I think that, Donald Trump is flying on a really nice private plane anytime he flies for the rest of his life. You know what I mean? Like, I'm kind of speaking out of my ass here. Like, I don't know enough about this to know, but I can pretty comfortably say that not only will you not bump into Donald Trump at the airport, like, that's not going to happen for the rest of your life. He won't be flying commercial like the rest of us. I also don't think Donald Trump will ever be on, like, a kind of crappy private plane. Like, I think he'll always be on, like, the nicest private plane.
I think Trump sees it as a trophy of, this is how great and strong I am, that other countries want to give us free stuff. And so this is a trophy of, I'm going to have the president of the United States of America and his library are going to have this incredible plane because people like me so much. And so he actually, I think he sees it as positive optics of, look, I just saved the taxpayers $400 million on a plane that we would have needed because people just want to give it to us. And I think you're right. I think that there's kind of levels of corruption that exist in government. And so, for example, if you manage to get your ends on the government for everyone to have to take some vaccine and stay in their house and their lives are going to be ruined, that's really bad. Or if you manage to get an in on the government to fund a war with a whole bunch of people, and that's really bad. But if you got a kid who goes over somewhere and they want to purchase a hotel for overpriced with a name on it, and because there's enough other big businesses going on with the oil that it's like a goodwill jet, it's not better. I don't prefer it, but there's just like soft corruption and really bad corruption. And so Donald Trump getting a plane that he sees as a trophy from a foreign country, it's not better, but I don't know. How much time do you got to spend upset with it? It's like he just has a different calculation that it's a trophy.
And there's no question you're right about that. I mean, it's clear from his tweet about it, that he likes I'm very smart. I got $400 million for nothing. The Democrats would have spent $400 million for it, but I'm smart, yes, obviously this is what motivates Trump. But just to on top of what you're saying, you're like, if there is some type of corruption or quid pro quo that is a part of a broader context where we're negotiating our way out of wars, like, I'm sorry, that just does not rise to the top of my outrage list. And there's just so many things to be outraged by. I mean, everything, every inch of our federal central government is built on corruption. The whole goddamn thing. The whole thing is a system rigging the economy against the regular people for the powerful people. I mean, everything down to like the biggest portion, excluding Medicaid, which is just, not great for a lot of other reasons. But if you look at the biggest budget items in the US government, if you take Medicaid out, it's overwhelmingly, like, the majority of the budget is defense, Medicare, and Social Security. Okay? Defense is all just a scheme to transfer money from the American people to weapons companies. Social Security and Medicare is all just a giant transfer of wealth from a poorer group to a wealthier group. The boomers, not me, the real boomers. It's like there's so much corruption, but so here, this is really what you're exercised about, is that before we got into the next disastrous, catastrophic war, we went, oh, maybe we could negotiate our way out of it. That's number one, what Ben Shapiro's mad at. And then one of the negotiating parties wants to buy Donald Trump a really nice gift. That's what you got. That's what really exercises you. And again, you could look at this because Ben Shapiro, like, I went back to that tweet from 2011. Ben Shapiro has a long track record of this stuff. Ben Shapiro, who supported all of the wars, never gets this exercise about talking about how incompetent some of the people who said these wars would be very easy, how incompetent they are. In fact, he'll still probably have all of them on his show and have friendly relations with them. He doesn't get exercised about that. It's Witkoff, you see, not the architects of Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya and Syria and Somalia and Yemen, the war in Ukraine, the current destruction of Gaza. None of that gets him exercised. But Witkoff attempting to negotiate because he happened to say at a certain point that, like, oh man, there really are a bunch of war hawks in our government who just want this war to continue. And Israel themselves just want the war to continue. We're trying to negotiate an end to it. That's what exercises Ben Shapiro. And what's beautiful about this is that you can't hide this. Like, people read through it and they see, like, dude, I've never seen you get this angry about anything else. I'm just saying, like, you can, I've said this for many years, but you can learn a lot about where someone stands politically by what gets them the angriest. It's an important way to assess people, because essentially we all have to have a hierarchy of outrages. When you don't get that right, you end up getting everything wrong. Look, this was a huge problem, huge problem with like the woke left, with like the insane progressives of the last few years, where they would just have no ability to have like a hierarchy of outrages. So this is why, like, Black Lives Matter, in the middle of Black Lives Matter, would just start getting obsessed with like Aunt Jemima being removed from the supermarket. And you're like, wait, what? Like, even like, listen, I obviously reject a lot of the progressive worldview, but like, even by your own stated worldview, like, you're saying there are like killer cops who are unaccountable to the citizenry. How are you even talking about Aunt Jemima right now? Like, this is just too ridiculous. It's like, but you see with guys like Ben Shapiro, look, like, all I'm saying is, find me the video. Please send it to me. I will play it on the show and I will apologize. Find me the video where Ben Shapiro is this angry about lockdowns. Find me the video where he's this angry about an aggressive military action that ended up being a disaster, just killed a bunch of innocent people and nothing productive came out of it. Find me that example. Find me an example where he's this outraged over vaccine mandates, or he's that, whatever it is. He's this outraged about anything that actually matters, that really destroyed people's lives. No. What he's outraged about is negotiating. And what he's worried about is that the negotiations might lead to a place where America realizes, oh, we don't need to be involved in a war here. There's simply no reason for us to need that. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is American Financing. Look, we all know we're living in a high price environment and have been for many years. For many people, the answer to this is to reach for your credit cards, and this is why credit card debt has been at all-time highs. Of course, the problem with credit card debt is that you're typically paying a very high interest rate. This is where American Financing comes in. They can help homeowners pay off high interest debt by using their home's equity. American Financing is a family-owned mortgage lender that's been around for 25 years, and they're licensed in all 50 states. Their mortgage consultants are salary-based, so there's no incentive for them to put you in a loan that doesn't make sense. And their customers save an average of $800 a month when they call and let American Financing help them. You may be able to close in as fast as 10 days, and you might even be able to delay up to 2 mortgage payments, creating more savings up front. Call them today at 866-886-2026. That's 866-886-2026, or you can visit them at americanfinancing.net/Dave. Once again, on average, people just like you are saving $800 a month, and they may be able to close your loan in as little as 10 days. Don't let the chaos of the economy get the best of you. It costs you nothing to get started, and you may be able to delay 2 mortgage payments, giving you a little cushion in these uncertain times. Call them today, 866-886-2026. That's 866-886-2026, or visit them online at americanfinancing.net/Dave. All right, let's get back into the show. Now, if you want to argue, which I'm sure is partially the case too, is that, look, Ben Shapiro is just so angry about October 7th that he wants payback for the people who did that. And that's the number one priority here. You know, and so if he sees you being friendly with Qatar, who's friendly with Hamas, or if he sees you being friendly with Iran, who's friendly with Hamas, then that's going to infuriate him. Like, oh, okay, that's fine. I'm never like telling anyone they can't have their identity. I understand that. But I think you should be honest about that. And if you're doing that, then you're not speaking for American conservatives. You're speaking for Israelis. And that's okay. You can do that. You know, like if you really want Benjamin Netanyahu to be your president, you could go to Israel and have that tomorrow. I'm sure Ben Shapiro owns property there, and I'm sure he'd be welcomed with open arms. But I do think you should be honest about that, because it doesn't seem to me that revenge for people killed in a foreign country in a very long ongoing conflict should be the number one motivators for Americans. I think the number one motivator for Americans should be what's in the best interest of the United States of America. That seems fairly reasonable to me. Okay, we're going to wrap up there. Thank you guys very much, as always, for listening. We will get the members only episode to you, but I'm not sure what time me and Rob are getting into Appleton. So we'll figure that out, but we'll record an episode for you guys out there. Catch you next time. Peace.